A riot destroys your store. Your windows are smashed, your inventory is gone, and everything you spent a decade building is now a pile of ash and broken glass.
Okay, who's gonna cover this? Is it covered? Well, I reached out to a local insurance agency. I wanna give them a shout out. Brower's Agency, they're in Breton and off Breton.
So who actually pays for all of that? The answer is far more complicated and far more frustrating than most people expect. Start with the obvious question. Don't you have insurance for this? Technically, yes. Most standard business insurance policies cover damage from riots, civil commotion, and vandalism, including fire, broken windows, stolen inventory, and damaged equipment.
And they tell me that it's really all up to the individual lease and your individual policy. So you gotta check with your lease and see if you are a tenant, okay, are the windows covered by the building or is that under your own insurance policy? But another issue we're learning, Alberto here, he owns Cinco de Mayo here on Monroe Center, and you're saying that in order for you to make...
Your business owner's policy, sometimes called a BOP, is designed to handle exactly this kind of situation. And if you can't open your doors because a mob turned your storefront into a war zone, there's something called business interruption insurance. That covers the income you lose while you're shut down and rebuilding. Sounds like a solid backstop, right? Here's where it falls apart. Business interruption insurance only kicks in if your property was physically damaged. So if a riot destroys the building next door, and the city shuts down your entire block with a curfew, and you can't open for 2 weeks, but your actual store wasn't touched, you get nothing. The riot didn't damage your property directly, so your policy doesn't care that you just lost 2 weeks of revenue.
2 weeks offline means zero revenue. Yet fixed costs like payroll if you're retaining staff, rent, utilities, and loans keep piling up. That's when business interruption coverage comes into play, designed to replace lost income during shutdowns caused by covered property damage. Since the riot led to qualifying physical loss, it usually applies here, covering the period of restoration, the reasonable time needed for repairs. However, if your building escaped direct damage, but you're still closed due to a citywide curfew or restricted downtown access, that's a whole different ballgame. It shifts to civil authority coverage, which has its own rules, often including waiting periods like 72 hours and lower limits over.
You're completely on your own. And that's assuming you even have insurance in the first place. According to the Insurance Journal, 75% of US businesses are underinsured. The New York Times found that roughly 40% of small businesses carry no insurance at all. Zero, none. So when the windows shatter and the shelves get cleaned out, there's no phone call to make, no claim to file.
Make a claim, you first need a police report, right?
Yes, and then I called the police yesterday, but they were so busy because there is a high demand right now in a police report. So they just told me to wait or go online to make a report. And I went online, but I was trying to, make the report there and then put the pictures and everything, but it was somehow kind of hard. So I called them, but they say I have to wait.
Yeah.
And right now I have to wait for them, and then I have to wait for the insurance.
Yeah, a lot of waiting downtown. And that's the problem is all of these business along this strip.
There's just you, standing in the wreckage, wondering what comes next. Take the On family in Minneapolis.
I'm coming to you live on YouTube, recording from, this is Lake Street here. What is that?
They ran a clothing business called 7 Mile Fashion, and during the 2020 George Floyd protests, 3 of their stores on Lake Street, Nicollet Avenue, and West Broadway were attacked. They estimated their losses at $2.5 million. Their insurance payout came to $600,000. The reason? They hadn't updated their policy in years. The coverage was based on old numbers that no longer reflected what the business was actually worth. And once the damage is done, you can't go back and buy more coverage. Janet Patrick, president of the Illinois Insurance Association Hotline, said it plainly. Situations where there's a lot of devastation like this, a lot of times people find they're underinsured. And once the damage has been done, it's too late. Multiply that story by hundreds, by thousands. During the 2 weeks following George Floyd's death in May of 2020, protests erupted in over 140 cities across 20 states, and some turned into full-scale riots. Insured losses hit between $1 and $2 billion, making it the most expensive civil disturbance in U.S. history. In the Twin Cities alone, more than 1,500 locations were damaged, and property losses topped $550 million. About 60% of those Minneapolis losses were uninsured. On just a 5-mile stretch of Lake Street, uninsured losses among small business owners exceeded $200 million. Insurance covered roughly half the actual destruction. The rest simply vanished. So if insurance won't make you whole, can you sue the rioters? In theory, absolutely. In practice, good luck. Riots are chaos. People wear masks and move in crowds. Pinpointing exactly who threw the brick through your window or walked out with your merchandise is nearly impossible without solid surveillance footage. And even when you do identify someone, collecting money from them is a different problem entirely. Most riot participants aren't sitting on piles of cash. One Cincinnati real estate company sued 90 people based on arrest records from the 2020 protests. Legal expert Mark Crumbine reviewed the case and said the odds were against a successful outcome, and doubly bad that they could ever collect on anything. What about suing the city? If the police didn't protect your business, shouldn't the government be liable?
A new lawsuit is claiming the city of Minneapolis should have been better prepared for the riots after George Floyd's murder. And the lack of action led to millions in damaged property.
Before Yang spoke with the business asking the city to take responsibility.
We had people stealing, running in until we shut the doors. And at that point, it was so dangerous.
Dan Campo is still reeling from the fallout of the George Floyd riots more than 3 years ago. The South Lindale Liquors owner says their former location was looted, boarded up, and shut down.
Under U.S. common law, the answer is generally no. Nothing makes a city, county, or state automatically liable for riot damage unless you can prove they acted negligently, and proving negligence in the middle of a massive civil disturbance is an extraordinarily high legal bar. The United Kingdom actually handles this differently. The UK Riot Compensation Act of 2016 gives victims of riot damage the right to claim compensation from local police authorities, even without insurance. There's a cap of £1 million per claim and a 42-day filing window, but the underlying principle is fundamentally different from the American approach. In the UK, the government acknowledges a responsibility to compensate people when it fails to maintain public order. In the United States, no equivalent program exists. There's no FEMA for riots, no federal backstop. When your insurance falls short, you absorb the loss. And here's what makes all of this even more unsettling going forward. The insurance industry itself is retreating from riot coverage.
What do? Then you go to a high-risk type carrier, right? Murphy said his insurance broker tried over a dozen top-tier carriers, but none of them were willing to insure the store. Finally, an insurance company from the wholesale market wrote them a policy. Do you think it was pretty? I don't think it was. I think it was you're just going to take this and you're going to like it. You're going to enjoy this. I mean, figuratively speaking, of course. It was a really awful policy, said Murphy. It's 4 times the premium we were paying, and it doesn't cover things like civil unrest. Kinds of things that happen.
For years, protection against strikes, riots, and civil commotion was bundled into standard policies at no extra cost. After 2020, that started changing. Insurers began excluding or restricting this coverage. So who pays when a riot destroys your store? Technically, your insurance company. Realistically, you do. You pay through the deductible. You pay through the gap between what your policy covers and what you actually lost. You pay through the weeks or months your business sits empty while customers drift away. You pay through a neighborhood that now looks like a disaster zone. Insurance is a safety net, but it's one with very large holes. And underneath it, there is nothing but concrete.